It was a quiet afternoon at the local fire station. The firefighters were going about their usual routines. Some were cleaning the trucks, others were checking equipment, and a few were sitting in the common area, sharing stories over cups of coffee. The calm was suddenly broken when the station's front door burst open. Everyone turned to see a teenager standing there, breathing heavily, clutching a bundle wrapped tightly in a blanket. The boy looked no older than 16, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. His clothes were dirty, and his hands trembled as he held the bundle close to his chest. The firefighters immediately sprang into action. One of them, a tall man with a kind face, stepped forward and asked the boy if he was okay. The boy didn't answer. Instead, he looked around the room, his eyes darting from one face to another, as if searching for someone he could trust. Finally, his gaze settled on the firefighter who had spoken to him. He took a step forward, his arms tightening around the bundle. The firefighters exchanged worried glances. Something was clearly wrong. The boy opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he held out the bundle, his hands shaking so badly that the blanket began to slip. The firefighter reached out to steady it, and that's when he heard it, a faint, muffled sound coming from inside the bundle. It was soft, almost like a whimper. The firefighter's eyes widened as he carefully pulled back the edge of the blanket. What he saw inside left him and the others in complete shock. Nestled in the blanket was a tiny baby, no more than a few days old. The infant's face was red, and its tiny fists were clenched tightly. It was clear that the baby had been crying, but now it lay still, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The firefighters stared in disbelief. None of them had expected this. The boy, still trembling, finally found his voice. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Help her. She's not breathing right." The room erupted into action. One firefighter rushed to grab a medical kit, while another called for an ambulance. The tall firefighter gently took the baby from the boy's arms and began to check her vital signs. The baby's skin was cold, and her breathing was labored. It was clear that she needed immediate medical attention. As the firefighter worked, he glanced up at the boy, who was now sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. "What's your name?" the firefighter asked gently. The boy shook his head, refusing to answer. "Where did you find her?" the firefighter pressed. Again, the boy remained silent, his shoulders shaking as he fought back tears. The firefighters didn't push him further. They knew that whatever had happened, the boy was in shock. For now, their priority was the baby. They wrapped her in a clean blanket and placed her on a makeshift bed, using whatever supplies they had to keep her warm. One of the firefighters, a woman with short hair and a calm demeanor, sat down next to the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing by bringing her here," she said softly. "You saved her life." The boy looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief. He nodded slightly but still didn't speak. As they waited for the ambulance to arrive, the firefighters tried to piece together what had happened. The boy had appeared out of nowhere, with no explanation, no identification, and no story to tell. The baby, too, was a mystery. She was clearly newborn, but there were no signs of where she had come from or who her parents were. The firefighters couldn't help but wonder if the boy was the father, but he looked too young, too scared. Whatever the truth was, it was clear that both the boy and the baby were in desperate need of help. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics quickly took over. They carefully placed the baby on a stretcher and began to administer oxygen. The boy watched silently, his eyes never leaving the baby's face. As the paramedics prepared to leave, one of them turned to the boy and asked if he wanted to come with them to the hospital. The boy hesitated, then shook his head. "I can't," he whispered. "I have to go." Before anyone could stop him, he turned and ran out of the fire station, disappearing into the streets. The firefighters were left stunned. They had so many questions, but no answers. Who was the boy? Where had he come from? And most importantly, who was the baby, and why had she been left in his care? As the ambulance drove away, the firefighters knew that this was just the beginning of a story that would haunt them for a long time. They also knew that they had to find the boy. He was the only one who could provide the answers they needed. Over the next few days, the firefighters couldn't stop thinking about the boy and the baby. They contacted the hospital to check on the baby's condition and were relieved to hear that she was stable. But the boy was still a mystery. They searched the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen him, but no one had. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The firefighters couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something deeper, something darker. And they were determined to find out what it was. Little did they know, the boy's story was far from over. And as they would soon discover, the events of that afternoon were just the beginning of a journey that would change all of their lives forever. The days following the mysterious incident at the fire station were filled with tension and unanswered questions. The baby, now under the care of the hospital, was slowly recovering. Doctors confirmed she was only a few days old and had been exposed to the cold for too long, which explained her weak condition. Thankfully, she was responding well to treatment. But her origins remained a mystery. The firefighters, meanwhile, couldn't stop thinking about the boy who had brought her in. Who was he? Why had he run away? And why did he have a newborn baby in his arms? The fire station became a hub of activity as the team decided to take matters into their own hands. They knew the police were investigating, but they felt a personal connection to the case. After all, the boy had come to them for help. The tall firefighter who had first approached the boy, a man known for his calm demeanor and leadership, took charge of the effort. He gathered the team and suggested they start by retracing the boy's steps. If we can figure out where he came from, we might be able to find him, he said. The others agreed, and they split into pairs to cover more ground. The firefighters began by canvassing the neighborhood around the station. They knocked on doors, showed a rough description of the boy, and asked if anyone had seen him. Most people shook their heads, but a few recalled seeing a teenager matching his description wandering the streets late at night. One elderly woman mentioned seeing a boy sitting on a bench near the park, clutching something close to his chest. He looked lost, she said. I thought about asking if he needed help, but he got up and left before I could. Another clue came from a convenience store owner a few blocks away. He remembered a boy coming in a couple of days earlier, buying a few bottles of water and some snacks. He seemed nervous, the owner recalled. Kept looking over his shoulder like he was being followed. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to pry. The firefighters thanked him and noted the details. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the search continued, the firefighters couldn't help but wonder about the boy's life. Was he homeless? Running from something, or someone? The way he had clutched the baby suggested he cared deeply for her, but his fear and silence made it clear he was in over his head. The more they thought about it, the more they realized how young he was. Just a kid himself, really. And yet, he had taken responsibility for a newborn in the most desperate of circumstances. It was both heartbreaking and admirable. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the baby was becoming the center of attention. Nurses and doctors had grown attached to the tiny infant, who they had started calling Little Hope as a temporary name. She was gaining strength, her cries growing louder and her movements more active. Social workers had been called in to handle her case, but without any information about her parents or family, her future was uncertain. The hospital staff hoped the firefighters' efforts would lead to some answers. Back at the fire station, the team regrouped to share what they had learned. The clues were scattered, but one thing was clear: the boy had been in the area for at least a few days. Possibly hiding or on the run. The firefighters decided to expand their search to nearby neighborhoods, focusing on places where someone might go to stay out of sight, abandoned buildings, underpasses, and shelters. They also reached out to local schools, thinking the boy might be a student, but no one recognized his description. Just as they were about to call it a day, one of the firefighters got a call from a friend who worked at a youth shelter across town. The friend mentioned that a boy matching the description had shown up there a week earlier, asking for help but refusing to give his name. He stayed for a night, then left early in the morning, the friend said. He seemed scared, like he didn't want to be found. The firefighter thanked his friend and immediately shared the news with the team. This was the most promising lead they had so far. The next morning, the firefighters headed to the youth shelter. They spoke with the staff, who confirmed the boy had been there. He didn't say much, one of the counselors recalled. But he kept asking about safe places for babies. At the time, we thought he was just curious, but now it makes sense. The counselor also mentioned that the boy had been carrying a backpack and seemed to have very few belongings. He looked like he'd been through a lot, she added. But he was polite, quiet. Didn't want to cause any trouble. The firefighters left the shelter with mixed feelings. They were relieved to have more information, but the boy's situation seemed more dire than they had imagined. If he was asking about safe places for babies, it meant he had been planning to give the baby up, or at least find someone to care for her. But why had he chosen the fire station? And why had he run away afterward? The questions kept piling up, but the firefighters were determined to keep going. As they drove back to the station, one of the firefighters noticed something on the side of the road, a backpack, partially hidden in the bushes. They pulled over to take a closer look. It was old and worn, with a broken strap, but it matched the description the shelter counselor had given. Inside, they found a few empty water bottles, a crumpled blanket, and a small notebook. The notebook was mostly empty, except for a few scribbled notes. One page had the words, "Fire Station," written in shaky handwriting, with an arrow pointing to a rough map of the area. Another page had a single sentence, "Please take care of her." The firefighters exchanged solemn looks. This was definitely the boy's backpack. And the notes confirmed what they had suspected, he had been planning to bring the baby to the fire station all along. But why? And where was he now? The discovery only deepened the mystery, but it also gave the team a renewed sense of purpose. They knew they were getting closer. As the sun set, the firefighters returned to the station, the backpack in hand. They knew the next step would be to involve the police more directly, but they also felt a personal responsibility to see this through. The boy had trusted them with the baby's life, and they weren't about to let him down. Whatever his story was, they were determined to find him, and to make sure he and the baby were safe. Little did they know, the boy was closer than they thought. And the truth he was hiding would soon come to light, changing everything they thought they knew about the situation. The discovery of the boy's backpack was a turning point. It confirmed that he had been planning to bring the baby to the fire station, but it also raised more questions. Why had he chosen them? And why had he run away afterward? The firefighters knew they needed to dig deeper. They decided to involve the police more formally, sharing the backpack and the notes they had found. The police, in turn, agreed to step up their search efforts, but the firefighters didn't want to sit back and wait. They felt a personal connection to the boy and the baby, and they were determined to see this through. The next morning, the firefighters split into teams again, this time focusing on areas near where the backpack had been found. They reasoned that the boy might still be nearby, possibly hiding or trying to stay out of sight. As they searched, they couldn't help but imagine what he must be going through. He was just a kid, alone and scared, with the weight of a newborn's life on his shoulders. The thought drove them to work even harder. One of the firefighters, a younger man who had recently joined the team, suggested they check an abandoned warehouse a few blocks from where the backpack was found. It's a long shot, he admitted, but I've heard rumors that kids sometimes hang out there. Maybe he's hiding there." The team agreed it was worth a look. They approached the warehouse cautiously, calling out as they entered to avoid startling anyone who might be inside. The warehouse was dark and damp, with broken windows letting in slivers of light. The air smelled of mildew and rust. As they moved deeper inside, they called out again, their voices echoing off the walls. At first, there was no response. But then, faintly, they heard a sound, a soft shuffling, like someone trying to stay quiet. The firefighters exchanged glances and moved toward the noise. In a corner of the warehouse, partially hidden behind a stack of old crates, they found him. The boy was curled up on the ground, wrapped in a thin blanket. He looked even younger than they remembered, his face pale and drawn, his eyes wide with fear. When he saw the firefighters, he flinched and tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. One of the firefighters, the woman who had comforted him at the station, stepped forward slowly, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're here to help. We're not going to hurt you." The boy stared at her, his breathing quick and shallow. For a moment, it seemed like he might bolt, but then his shoulders slumped, and he nodded weakly. The firefighters moved closer, careful not to overwhelm him. They could see now how exhausted he was, how thin and fragile he looked. It was clear he hadn't eaten or slept properly in days. The woman sat down a few feet away from him, keeping her voice calm and steady. "We've been looking for you," she said. "We wanted to make sure you're okay. And we wanted to tell you that the baby is safe. She's at the hospital, and she's doing much better." The boy's eyes filled with tears at the mention of the baby, but he didn't speak. He just nodded again, his hands clutching the blanket tightly. The firefighters gave him some space, offering him water and a snack from their supplies. At first, he hesitated, but eventually, he accepted, eating and drinking slowly as if he hadn't had a proper meal in days. As he ate, the woman continued to talk to him, asking gentle questions but not pushing too hard. "Can you tell us your name?" she asked. The boy shook his head, his eyes downcast. "That's okay," she said. "You don't have to tell us anything you're not ready to share. But we're here to help you, just like we helped the baby." The boy looked up at her, his expression a mix of fear and hope. For the first time, he seemed to relax slightly, as if realizing they weren't there to hurt him. The firefighters took this as a good sign and continued to reassure him. They told him about the search efforts, about how worried they had been, and how glad they were to find him safe. Slowly, the boy began to open up, not with words, but with small gestures. He nodded when they asked if he was cold, and he allowed them to wrap him in a warmer blanket. As the firefighters worked to gain his trust, they couldn't help but wonder about his story. What had led him to this point? Why was he so afraid? And where had the baby come from? They knew they might not get answers right away, but for now, their priority was getting him to safety. They called the police and an ambulance, explaining the situation and asking for a quiet, non-intrusive approach. They didn't want to scare the boy any more than he already was. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics were gentle and respectful, treating the boy with care. He seemed hesitant at first, but the firefighters stayed by his side, reassuring him every step of the way. "We're not going anywhere," the woman told him. "We'll stay with you as long as you need us." The boy nodded, his trust in them growing with each passing moment. As they rode to the hospital, the boy finally spoke, just a few words, but it was a start. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The firefighters smiled, their hearts swelling with relief. They knew this was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. At the hospital, the boy was checked over by doctors, who confirmed he was malnourished and exhausted but otherwise unharmed. The firefighters stayed with him, keeping him company and continuing to build trust. They also arranged for him to see the baby, hoping it would bring him some comfort. When he was wheeled into the nursery and saw little Hope lying in her crib, his eyes filled with tears again. He reached out a trembling hand, and one of the nurses gently guided it to the baby's tiny fingers. The boy's face softened, and for the first time, he smiled, a small, fragile smile, but it was enough. The firefighters knew there was still a long road ahead. They needed to find out who the boy was, where he had come from, and how he had ended up with the baby. But for now, they were just relieved to have found him and to see him safe. They also knew that whatever his story was, they were committed to helping him through it. As they left the hospital that night, the firefighters couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They had started the day with so many questions, and while they didn't have all the answers yet, they had made progress. The boy was safe, the baby was thriving, and they had taken the first steps toward uncovering the truth. Whatever came next, they were ready to face it together. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft hum of machines and the occasional murmur of nurses in the hallway. The boy sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting in his lap, his eyes fixed on the floor. He had been quiet since arriving at the hospital, speaking only when necessary and even then in short, hesitant sentences. The firefighters had stayed with him, taking turns sitting by his side, offering words of encouragement and reassurance. They knew he was still scared, still unsure of what would happen next, but they were determined to help him feel safe. The woman firefighter, who had been the first to comfort him at the station, sat beside him now, her voice gentle as she spoke. "You're doing great," she said. "You've been so brave. We're all really proud of you." The boy glanced at her briefly, then looked away, but she could see the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to her. As the hours passed, the boy began to open up a little more. He still didn't share much about himself, but he started to answer simple questions. When the firefighters asked if he was feeling better, he nodded. When they asked if he was hungry, he shook his head. And when they mentioned the baby, his eyes lit up with a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something else they couldn't quite place. The firefighters took this as a sign to gently probe further. "Can you tell us about the baby?" the woman asked. "How did you find her?" The boy hesitated, his hands twisting the edge of the blanket. For a long moment, he didn't speak, and the firefighters wondered if they had pushed too far. But then, in a voice so soft they had to lean in to hear, he began to tell his story. "She's my sister," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The firefighters exchanged glances, their hearts aching for the boy. He went on to explain that their mother had left a few days after the baby was born, saying she needed to take care of something. She hadn't come back. The boy, left alone with the newborn, had done his best to care for her, but he didn't know what to do. He had no money, no food, and no one to turn to. He had tried to keep the baby warm and fed, but as the days passed, he realized he couldn't do it alone. "I didn't know what to do," he said, his voice breaking. "I was so scared. I didn't want her to die." The firefighters listened in silence, their hearts breaking for the boy and the baby. They couldn't imagine the weight he had been carrying, the fear and desperation he must have felt. It was a miracle he had managed to keep the baby alive as long as he had. The boy went on to explain how he had heard about the fire station from someone in the neighborhood. They had told him that firefighters helped people, that they could be trusted. So, with no other options, he had made the difficult decision to bring the baby to them. "I didn't want to leave her," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But I didn't know what else to do." The firefighters were moved by his story, their respect for the boy growing even more. He had been through so much, and yet he had done everything he could to protect his sister. They assured him that he had made the right choice, that the baby was safe and being well cared for. "You saved her life," the woman firefighter said. "You're a hero." The boy looked up at her, his eyes filled with doubt, but he didn't argue. As the boy's story unfolded, the firefighters realized there was still much they didn't know. Where was his mother? Did he have any other family? And what would happen to him and the baby now? They knew they needed to involve social services, but they also wanted to make sure the boy felt supported every step of the way. They promised him they would do everything they could to help him and his sister, and for the first time, he seemed to believe them. Later that day, a social worker arrived to speak with the boy. The firefighters stayed with him, offering their support as he answered the social worker's questions. It was a difficult conversation, and the boy was clearly uncomfortable, but he did his best to cooperate. He explained that he and his mother had moved around a lot, never staying in one place for long. He didn't know much about his father, and he had no other family he could turn to. As for his mother, he had no idea where she was or if she would come back. The social worker listened carefully, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. She explained that the boy and his sister would need to be placed in foster care, at least temporarily, while they tried to locate his mother and assess the situation. The boy nodded, his expression resigned. He didn't seem surprised, but the firefighters could see the fear in his eyes. They knew how overwhelming this must be for him. Before the social worker left, the firefighters asked if they could stay involved in the boy's case. They explained that they felt a personal connection to him and his sister and wanted to make sure they were okay. The social worker agreed, promising to keep them updated and involve them as much as possible. It was a small comfort, but it meant a lot to the firefighters, and to the boy. As the day turned to evening, the firefighters prepared to leave the hospital. They promised the boy they would be back the next day and encouraged him to rest and take care of himself. "You're not alone anymore," the woman firefighter told him. "We're here for you, no matter what." The boy nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. He didn't say much, but his expression spoke volumes. As the firefighters walked out of the hospital, they couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. They were relieved to have found the boy and to know that he and the baby were safe, but they also knew there were still many challenges ahead. The boy's life had been turned upside down, and it would take time for him to heal and adjust. But the firefighters were determined to be there for him, to offer whatever support they could. They also knew that their work wasn't done. They needed to find out what had happened to the boy's mother and why she had left her children in such a desperate situation. They needed to make sure the boy and his sister were placed in a safe and loving home. And they needed to continue building trust with the boy, helping him feel secure and valued. As they drove back to the fire station, the firefighters talked about what they had learned and what still needed to be done. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face whatever came next. They had started this journey with a simple act of kindness, and they were determined to see it through to the end. The days following the boy's admission to the hospital were a whirlwind of activity. Social workers, police, and child services became involved, each working to piece together the puzzle of the boy's life and the circumstances that had led him to the fire station. The firefighters, true to their word, stayed closely involved, acting as a bridge between the boy and the authorities. They had earned his trust, and he seemed to feel safer when they were around. For the firefighters, it was more than just a sense of duty, it was personal. The boy, whose name they finally learned was Alex, began to open up more as the days went by. He was still hesitant and guarded, but the constant presence of the firefighters gave him a sense of stability he hadn't felt in a long time. He shared bits and pieces of his life, how he and his mother had moved from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. He talked about the baby, his sister, whom he called Mia, and how he had tried to care for her after their mother left. His voice trembled when he spoke about the night he decided to bring Mia to the fire station, his fear and desperation palpable. The firefighters listened, their hearts breaking for Alex. They couldn't imagine what it must have been like for him, a teenager, to shoulder such a heavy burden. They made sure to reassure him at every turn, reminding him that he wasn't alone anymore. "We're here for you," the woman firefighter told him one evening as they sat together in the hospital room. You and Mia both. We're not going anywhere. Meanwhile, the search for Alex's mother was underway. The police had launched an investigation, using the information Alex had provided to track her down. It wasn't much to go on: a first name, a vague description, and a few locations where they had lived, but it was a start. The firefighters helped where they could, sharing details from their conversations with Alex and offering to assist in any way possible. They knew finding his mother was crucial, not just for Alex's sake but for Mia's as well. As the investigation progressed, the firefighters also worked to ensure that Alex and Mia were placed in a safe and supportive foster home. They met with social workers, attended meetings, and even visited a few potential foster families to get a sense of where the children might end up. It was important to them that Alex and Mia stayed together, and they made sure to advocate for that at every opportunity. "They've been through enough," the tall firefighter said during one meeting. "The least we can do is make sure they have each other." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a breakthrough came in the search for Alex's mother. The police located her in a nearby city, living in a small apartment with a man they later identified as her boyfriend. When they brought her in for questioning, she was visibly shaken and defensive. She claimed she hadn't abandoned her children, she had simply needed time to sort things out and had planned to return for them. But as the questioning continued, her story began to unravel. It became clear that she had left Alex and Mia in a desperate situation, with no plan for their care and no intention of coming back anytime soon. The firefighters were furious when they heard the news. They couldn't understand how a mother could leave her children like that, especially a newborn. But they also knew that anger wouldn't help Alex or Mia. Instead, they focused on what they could do to support the children and ensure they had a better future. They continued to visit Alex in the hospital, bringing him books, games, and small treats to lift his spirits. They also made sure to keep him updated on the search for his mother, being honest but gentle in their explanations. One afternoon, as they sat with Alex in the hospital room, the woman firefighter decided to broach a difficult topic. "Alex," she began, "we need to talk about what happens next. The social workers have found a foster family for you and Mia. They're really nice people, and they're excited to meet you. But before you go, we want to make sure you're okay with everything. Do you have any questions?" Alex was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the floor. Finally, he looked up and asked, "Will I still get to see you guys?" The firefighters exchanged glances, their hearts swelling with emotion. "Of course," the tall firefighter said. "We're not going anywhere. We'll visit you as often as we can, and you can always call us if you need anything. You're part of our family now, Alex." The boy nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." The firefighters smiled, their own eyes misty. They knew this was just the beginning of a long journey for Alex and Mia, but they were determined to be there every step of the way. A few days later, Alex and Mia were placed with a foster family, a kind couple in their 30s who had experience caring for children in difficult situations. The firefighters visited the home before the placement to make sure it was a good fit, and they were relieved to see how welcoming and supportive the couple was. They promised to stay in touch and made sure Alex had their phone numbers and a way to reach them if he needed anything. The day Alex and Mia left the hospital was bittersweet. The firefighters were thrilled to see them moving toward a brighter future, but they also knew how hard it would be for Alex to adjust to a new life. As they said their goodbyes, the woman firefighter pulled Alex into a tight hug. "You're so brave," she told him. "And you're going to do amazing things. Don't ever forget that." Alex hugged her back, his grip tight. "I won't," he said. "And thank you. For everything." As the firefighters watched Alex and Mia drive away with their new foster family, they felt a mix of emotions: pride, relief, and a deep sense of hope. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew that Alex and Mia were strong. They had already overcome so much, and with the right support, they could build a better life. Back at the fire station, the team reflected on everything that had happened. They had started this journey with a simple act of kindness, and it had turned into something much bigger. They had formed a bond with Alex and Mia, and they were committed to staying involved in their lives. They also knew that their work wasn't done. There were still so many children out there who needed help, and they were determined to make a difference. As they sat together in the common area, the tall firefighter raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Alex and Mia," he said. "And to all the kids out there who need someone to believe in them. We'll be there for them, no matter what." The others raised their cups, their hearts full. They knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, for Alex and Mia, and for themselves. The first few weeks in the foster home were a mix of adjustment and uncertainty for Alex and Mia. The foster parents, Mark and Lisa, were kind and patient, doing their best to make the children feel welcome. They had set up a cozy room for Alex and a nursery for Mia, complete with toys, books, and everything the children might need. But despite their efforts, Alex was hesitant to let his guard down. He had been through so much, and trust didn't come easily. The firefighters visited often, checking in on Alex and Mia and offering their support. They brought small gifts, a new blanket for Mia, a sketchpad and pencils for Alex, and spent time talking with him about how he was adjusting. At first, Alex was quiet, answering their questions with short, careful replies. But as the visits continued, he began to open up more, sharing his thoughts and feelings in a way he hadn't before. One afternoon, as they sat together in the backyard, Alex confided in the woman firefighter. "It's weird," he said, his voice soft. "Everyone here is so nice, but it doesn't feel real. Like, what if it's all just temporary? What if they decide they don't want us anymore?" The firefighter listened, her heart aching for the boy. She knew how hard it was for him to trust, given everything he had been through. "I get why you feel that way," she said gently. "But Mark and Lisa seem really committed to you and Mia. They wouldn't have taken you in if they didn't want to be here for you. And even if things change, you've got us. We're not going anywhere, Alex. You're stuck with us." She smiled, hoping to lighten the mood, and was relieved when Alex gave a small smile in return. As the weeks passed, Alex began to settle into his new routine. He started attending a local school, where he made a few friends and even joined an art club. Drawing had always been a way for him to escape, and now he had the chance to explore it more deeply. His teachers noticed his talent and encouraged him to keep practicing, which gave him a sense of pride and purpose. Mia, too, was thriving. She had grown stronger and more active, her tiny face lighting up with smiles and laughter. Mark and Lisa doted on her, and Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of relief seeing his sister so happy and well cared for. He still worried about her future, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like they might be okay. Despite the progress, there were still challenges. Alex struggled with feelings of guilt and responsibility, often blaming himself for what had happened. He wondered if he could have done more to keep his family together, if he had failed his mother in some way. These thoughts weighed heavily on him, and he found it hard to talk about them. But the firefighters, along with Mark and Lisa, were patient and understanding, offering reassurance whenever they could. One evening, after a particularly tough day, Alex broke down in tears during a visit from the firefighters. "I just don't get it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Why did she leave us? Why didn't she care enough to stay?" The firefighters sat with him, letting him cry and vent his feelings. They knew there were no easy answers, but they also knew how important it was for Alex to express his pain. "It's not your fault," the tall firefighter said firmly. "You did everything you could, Alex. You kept Mia safe, and you got her help when she needed it. That's more than anyone could have asked of you. Your mom's choices are on her, not you." Alex nodded, though it was clear he was still struggling to believe it. The firefighters stayed with him until he had calmed down, promising to come back soon. As time went on, Alex began to see a therapist, someone who could help him work through his emotions and build healthier coping mechanisms. It wasn't easy, talking about his feelings was still hard, but he slowly began to make progress. He learned that it was okay to ask for help, that he didn't have to carry everything on his own. And he started to believe, little by little, that he deserved to be happy. The firefighters continued to be a constant presence in Alex and Mia's lives. They attended school events, celebrated birthdays, and even helped out with babysitting when Mark and Lisa needed a break. They had become more than just first responders, they were family. And for Alex, that meant the world. One day, as they sat together at the park, Alex turned to the woman firefighter and said something that surprised her. "I think I want to be a firefighter when I grow up," he said, his voice steady and sure. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and pride. "Really?" she asked. "What made you decide that?" Alex shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "You guys saved us," he said simply. "And I want to do that for someone else someday. I want to help people, like you helped me." The firefighter felt a lump form in her throat. She reached out and ruffled his hair, her heart swelling with emotion. "I think you'd make an amazing firefighter," she said. "And we'd be lucky to have you on the team." As the months passed, Alex and Mia continued to grow and thrive. They still had their struggles, but they were surrounded by people who loved and supported them. And for the first time in a long time, Alex felt like he had a future to look forward to. He still thought about his mother sometimes, wondering where she was and if she ever thought about him and Mia. But he was learning to let go of the guilt and anger, to focus on the people who were there for him now. The firefighters, too, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had started this journey with a simple act of kindness, and it had turned into something life-changing, not just for Alex and Mia, but for themselves. They had seen the power of compassion and community, and they were more committed than ever to making a difference in the lives of others. As they sat together at the fire station one evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, the tall firefighter raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Alex and Mia," he said. "And to all the kids out there who need someone to believe in them. We'll be there for them, no matter what." The others raised their cups, their hearts full. They knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, for Alex and Mia, and for themselves. Alex's dream of becoming a firefighter became a driving force in his life. It gave him a sense of purpose, something to work toward. He started spending more time at the fire station, learning about the equipment, observing the firefighters in action, and even helping out with small tasks. The firefighters were thrilled to see his enthusiasm and did everything they could to encourage him. They taught him about fire safety, showed him how to use basic tools, and let him sit in on training sessions. For Alex, it was like stepping into a whole new world, one where he felt like he belonged. Mark and Lisa, his foster parents, were supportive of his aspirations. They saw how much it meant to him and how it helped him focus on the future rather than the past. They even helped him research firefighter training programs and talked to him about what he would need to do to achieve his goal. "It's a big commitment," Mark told him one evening over dinner. "But if it's what you really want, we'll do everything we can to help you get there." Alex nodded, his determination unwavering. "I know it's going to be hard," he said. "But I want to do it. I want to help people, like the firefighters helped me and Mia." Mark and Lisa smiled, proud of the young man he was becoming. As Alex immersed himself in his new passion, he also continued to work on healing emotionally. Therapy had become a regular part of his life, and while it wasn't always easy, he was making progress. He was learning to let go of the guilt he had carried for so long and to forgive himself for things that had never been his fault. He still had moments of doubt and sadness, but they were becoming less frequent, replaced by a growing sense of hope and self-worth. Mia, too, was thriving. She was now a lively toddler, her laughter filling the house and bringing joy to everyone around her. Alex adored his little sister and took his role as her big brother seriously. He played with her, read to her, and made sure she always felt loved and safe. Seeing her happy and healthy was a constant reminder of how far they had come. One weekend, the firefighters invited Alex to participate in a community outreach event at the station. They were hosting a fire safety workshop for local families, and they thought it would be a great opportunity for Alex to get involved. He jumped at the chance, eager to contribute in any way he could. On the day of the event, he helped set up tables, handed out brochures, and even demonstrated how to use a fire extinguisher under the watchful eye of the firefighters. It was his first time speaking in front of a group, and while he was nervous, he did an amazing job. After the event, the woman firefighter pulled him aside. "You were incredible out there," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You've got a real talent for this, Alex. I can totally see you as a firefighter one day." Alex beamed, his confidence growing with her words. "Thanks," he said. "I really want to do this. I want to make a difference." As the months went by, Alex's bond with the firefighters deepened. They became mentors and role models, guiding him not just in his career aspirations but in life as well. They taught him about teamwork, responsibility, and the importance of giving back to the community. And they continued to be a source of support and encouragement, reminding him that he was capable of achieving anything he set his mind to. But Alex's journey wasn't without its challenges. As he got older, he began to face the realities of what it would take to become a firefighter. He learned about the physical and mental demands of the job, the rigorous training, and the competitive application process. There were moments when he felt overwhelmed, wondering if he was cut out for it. But every time he doubted himself, the firefighters were there to remind him of his strength and resilience. "You've already been through so much," the tall firefighter told him one day after a particularly tough training session. "If anyone can handle this, it's you. You've got the heart of a firefighter, Alex. Don't ever forget that." Those words stayed with Alex, fueling his determination. He started working out regularly, building his strength and endurance. He studied hard in school, knowing that good grades would be important for his future. And he continued to spend time at the fire station, soaking up every bit of knowledge he could. One evening, as he sat with the firefighters at the station, he asked a question that had been on his mind for a while. "Do you think I'll ever be as good as you guys?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The firefighters exchanged glances, then the woman firefighter spoke up. "Alex, you're already better than we were at your age," she said. "You've got courage, compassion, and a drive to help others. That's what makes a great firefighter. The rest is just training." Her words filled Alex with a sense of pride and determination. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready to face it. And he knew he wouldn't be alone. He had the firefighters, Mark and Lisa, and Mia cheering him on every step of the way. As the years passed, Alex continued to work toward his goal. He graduated from high school with honors and enrolled in a firefighter training program. The firefighters attended his graduation ceremony, their hearts swelling with pride as they watched him walk across the stage. They knew how far he had come and how much he had overcome to get to this point. On the first day of his training program, Alex felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He knew it would be one of the hardest things he had ever done, but he was ready. As he stood in front of the training center, he thought about everything he had been through, the fear, the pain, the moments of doubt. And then he thought about the firefighters, the people who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked inside, ready to take the first step toward his dream. The firefighters watched from a distance, their hearts full. They knew this was just the beginning for Alex, and they couldn't wait to see where his journey would take him. They had started this story with a simple act of kindness, and it had turned into something extraordinary, a testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and the human spirit. As they drove back to the fire station, the tall firefighter raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. "To Alex," he said. "And to all the kids out there who need someone to believe in them. We'll be there for them, no matter what." The others nodded, their hearts full. They knew their work wasn't done, but they also knew they had made a difference, one life at a time. Years had passed since Alex first stepped into the fire station as a scared teenager clutching his baby sister. Now, he stood tall and confident in his firefighter uniform, ready to graduate from the training academy. The journey had been long and grueling, filled with challenges that tested his physical and mental strength. But Alex had persevered, driven by his dream and the unwavering support of the people who had become his family. The graduation ceremony was held on a sunny afternoon at the training academy. Alex's foster parents, Mark and Lisa, sat in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. Beside them was Mia, now a bright and energetic 8-year-old, clutching a small bouquet of flowers for her big brother. The firefighters who had first welcomed Alex into their lives were also there, their hearts swelling with emotion as they watched him prepare to receive his badge. When Alex's name was called, he walked across the stage with a steady stride, his head held high. The crowd erupted into applause, but Alex's eyes were fixed on the people who had believed in him from the beginning. As he accepted his badge and shook hands with the academy's chief, he felt a surge of gratitude and pride. He had done it. He had become a firefighter. After the ceremony, Alex was surrounded by his loved ones, all eager to congratulate him. Mia was the first to reach him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You did it, Alex," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Alex laughed and picked her up, spinning her around. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mia," he said, his voice warm with affection. Mark and Lisa hugged him next, their eyes glistening with tears. "We're so proud of you, Alex," Lisa said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've come so far, and we know you're going to do amazing things." Mark nodded, clapping Alex on the shoulder. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, son. We're honored to be a part of it." The firefighters, too, took their turn to congratulate him. The woman firefighter, who had been one of his earliest supporters, pulled him into a tight hug. "I always knew you had it in you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're going to be an incredible firefighter, Alex. We're all so proud of you." The tall firefighter, who had become a mentor and father figure to Alex, stepped forward next. He placed a hand on Alex's shoulder and looked him in the eye. "You've got the heart of a firefighter," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Never forget that. And never forget that we're here for you, no matter what." Alex nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I wouldn't be here without you guys." As the celebration continued, Alex took a moment to reflect on his journey. He thought about the scared teenager who had walked into the fire station all those years ago, clutching his baby sister and desperate for help. He thought about the long nights, the moments of doubt, and the challenges he had overcome. And he thought about the people who had stood by him, believing in him even when he didn't believe in himself. He knew his journey wasn't over. Becoming a firefighter was just the beginning. There would be new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But he was ready. He had the strength, the determination, and the support of the people who loved him. And he had a purpose, to help others, just as he had been helped. A few weeks later, Alex officially joined the fire station where his journey had begun. It was a full-circle moment, one that filled him with a deep sense of pride and gratitude. The firefighters welcomed him with open arms, thrilled to have him as part of their team. They knew he would bring passion, dedication, and a unique perspective to the job. Alex's first call as a firefighter came on a quiet evening. The alarm sounded, and the team sprang into action, rushing to the scene of a house fire. As they worked together to extinguish the flames and ensure everyone was safe, Alex felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had ever experienced. This was what he had worked for, what he had dreamed of. He was making a difference. After the call, as they drove back to the station, the tall firefighter turned to Alex with a smile. "You did great out there," he said. "You're a natural." Alex grinned, his heart swelling with pride. "Thanks," he said. "It feels good to be part of the team." As the months went by, Alex settled into his new role, growing more confident with each call. He quickly earned the respect of his colleagues, who admired his dedication and compassion. He also became a role model for the younger firefighters, sharing his story and encouraging them to never give up on their dreams. One day, the fire station received a special visit. A young boy, no older than Alex had been when he first came to the station, walked in clutching a bundle in his arms. The firefighters recognized the look of fear and desperation in his eyes, and they sprang into action, just as they had done for Alex all those years ago. Alex was the first to approach the boy, his heart aching with empathy. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. We're here to help." The boy looked up at him, his eyes filled with tears. "Please," he whispered. "Help us." As Alex took the bundle from the boy's arms and saw the tiny baby inside, he felt a surge of determination. He knew what it was like to be in that boy's shoes, to feel scared and alone. And he knew that he had the power to make a difference, just as the firefighters had done for him. The team worked together to ensure the boy and the baby were safe, just as they had done for Alex and Mia. And as they did, Alex felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. He had come full circle, from the scared teenager who needed help to the firefighter who could provide it. That evening, as they sat together at the station, the tall firefighter raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To Alex," he said. "And to all the kids out there who need someone to believe in them. We'll be there for them, no matter what." The others raised their cups, their hearts full. They knew their work wasn't done, but they also knew they had made a difference, one life at a time. As Alex looked around at the people who had become his family, he felt a deep sense of gratitude and pride. He had come so far, and he knew his journey was just beginning. He was a firefighter, a brother, a son, and a friend. And he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing he had the strength and support to overcome anything.